I just knew instinctively that this was that thing I couldn't put my finger on, that piece of the puzzle that if we weren't able to address what was going on there for my husband, that we were not going to make it.
Hi, I'm Carol Podell, and this is She Takes the Lead. Hi, party people. It's Carol. So I have a really interesting guest today. Her name is Danielle Sebastian, and she's the founder and CEO of Wife Care. She helps wives navigate their relationships with their husbands when their husbands or their spouses are survivors of childhood trauma. It's a very untapped universe out there. We have a lot more resources. We have a lot more resources for people who are looking to heal themselves and their trauma, but we don't really have a lot of coaches or mentors or just resources around being the spouse of someone who is trying to navigate their own trauma and how to not just support them, but support yourselves while continuing the relationship. And this is what Danielle Sebastian does. And I really enjoyed and found this interview really interesting. And I hope you do too. Enjoy. Hi, Danielle. Welcome to She Takes the Lead.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here.
I'm thrilled that you're here, and I'm really excited about this conversation. So tell me a little bit about what you do from not the bio, the you.
My journey with what I'm doing right now started about 10 years ago now. I can't believe it's been 10 years. But I married my dream guy on a beach in Kauai. He had a daughter that we brought into the family, which was so exciting. And we were so excited to have some other, one or two members join the family from there. And the first couple of years were sort of a struggle. And I started to notice some behaviors that I just couldn't put my finger on, that just didn't seem to make sense. There was a deep need to control me and the environment. It just seems like I was constantly walking on eggshells. I never knew what I would say that would create an extreme emotion that seemed very out of proportion to what the situation was. I also noticed significant insomnia, as well as a need to withdraw every time there was conflict. So I'd see these strong emotions, and then there would be this huge pulling away. And after our son was born, that's when things got worse. And it was only when we hit rock bottom that my husband was able to reveal for the first time to anyone a terrible history of childhood abuse at the hands of the church.
Wow.
And I just knew instinctively that this was that thing I couldn't put my finger on, that piece of the puzzle that if we weren't able to address what was going on there for my husband, that we were not going to make it.
Wow, that's incredible. That's incredible. And how long between the time that you were married and then into that, what did that happen?
My son was born 2 years about into our marriage. And then I would say we had this incident we really struggled through for another 2 years. He was a toddler.
Oh, wow. Having a toddler in general in the house plus a little girl, that's a lot, but to put this on it and have that kind of burgeoning secret. And also good for him for talking to you about it. That's huge.
Yeah. And what I know now that I didn't know then is that why does it take so long? Why did things seem to be going fine? And then all of a sudden I started to see these trauma emotions. And I found out that this is very normal, that trauma survivors, really 3 or 4 things need to be in place before they sometimes can even, acknowledge what happened to them, remember in certain cases.
Oh, wow.
And much less verbalize it. And they need to have enough space away from the abuse that they feel safe.
Of course.
So that's why you see things later in life. They also need to be in a safe situation, meaning usually that they have somebody they trust that can handle the truth. So while it seemed like a burden to me at times, when I was able to realize that, I realized that actually I was a gift to him that made him feel safe enough with someone that he could actually address him.
Wow.
The
Yeah.
other thing that happens is that sometimes there's a catalytic event. And so that can be a death in the family. It could be having a son who is the same age as when the abuse occurred. There's sometimes a catalytic event that brings the emotions to where they just can't suppress them any longer.
Right. Often, I would assume, and myself included, I was married for a long time. You uncover something or you learn something about your spouse and you take it in very careful hands and you hold it and you try to help. But you redefined try to help. I mean, you really, you have a book now, you're a speaker on this. This is your message. What made you go from I'm going to help my husband to I'm going to help everybody. I'm going to help all of the wives of these men. I wanted to say also, what you do is help the wives of the trauma survivors, not the traumatized. And that's there are not that many people who do that. It doesn't sound like there's probably a support network for that.
Yes, I had to learn it all from scratch. I could find nothing. And by nothing, I mean there was a couple of articles online. There was quite a bit, obviously, for trauma healing, but just very little for the partners and the family members who are dealing with this and real life stuff on what it feels like as a spouse. I just couldn't find it. And so as I was able to really just stumble through trial and error, I researched everything I could. Little chapters in books would be there. And I was like, when we finally got to this point where I'm like, I think we made it through. I think we have the tools to be able to survive all these triggering events. And if we end up having a low in the future, I think that we have the tools to get us out. It was at that point that I was like, I think that I need to put everything I've learned together in a package so that it doesn't take people 10 years to get there.
That's incredible. And you work with other women who are now married or partnered with survivors of trauma, right?
Yes, I work with them individually, and it's a step-by-step process that really works. And it really starts with understanding the trauma survivor's brain. What we need to realize as spouses is that the coping mechanisms that these little kids' brains developed, how they were changed because of the constant stress and unpredictability and fear that they were under. And they developed coping mechanisms that helped them survive their childhood. Things like I talked about before, needing to control whatever they can because they felt so out of control. Things like withdrawing from, obviously, and even just dissociating, of course, from their abuse. That's a coping mechanism that they use anytime they feel that they're in danger. They also, the nightmares are some of those things that I saw, and pushing away, not trusting people. And you can imagine that those coping mechanisms that they use to survive just don't work well in adult relationships. No. Especially if the spouse doesn't understand what's going on and they're taking it all. It's all me, right? I mean, I'm not trustworthy. I need to be controlled. He's trying to control me. No, he's not trying to control you. He's trying to make himself feel safe.
Oh, wow.
So if we don't understand those pieces and realize what those coping mechanisms are in your particular relationship, because there's more than I just described, of course.
Yeah.
Then you really can't get anywhere. And then once you know that, then you can start to separate yourself from those trauma responses and create new patterns and healthier patterns so that they're coping in different ways than they did in the past.
Wow. As a spouse or as a partner, I think it's kind of amazing because, there's got to be a boundary, and there's got to be a lot of boundaries that you have to set in order to do that successfully. Because I'm sure otherwise you're bleeding into their caretaking all the time. And you're probably, and women do this kind of often in general, is we're putting other people in front of us anyway. So talk me through a little bit about first about how you work a bit, and then also about how you create safety for the spouse to be able to do this and keep their own universe.
Yes, I have a whole chapter, I think, in the book that's called Getting Good at Setting Boundaries.
Okay, I'll read
Because
that first.
that is a key component
Yeah.
to this that is very difficult for
Yeah.
spouses.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is this: you need to understand the trauma survivor's brain. You need to separate yourself from the responses, but then you need to set boundaries so that you're not taking the brunt of those emotions. It
Right.
is a natural instinct when you are constantly walking on eggshells, essentially,
Yeah.
when you're afraid of the next shoe dropping, that you try and take it all on, that you try to make it so that none of those stressors hit your husband's radar, that nothing will get to him that you think will upset him, not saying anything that you think will upset the situation. But what I've found is that us doing that is actually making it worse for ourselves. And it also is not allowing your partner to create those new coping mechanisms by dealing with those emotions and stressors head on.
That is a lot.
That is a lot.
So tell me, do you have a background in this? Other than a force, clearly, as a person and as a woman and as a partner, what was your childhood like that you were able to kind of see this also? Where was your linking? I know you love him, but where did you link in with this experience?
That's a very good question. There's a couple of things. First of all, I'm a pharmacist. My profession is a pharmacist. And so I am very good at researching and getting to the meat of what I really need to get to and what I can take from it. So, what works? I'm really good at that. And I'm also really good at breaking things down into smaller steps that you can step by step process, break it down. So that's why I was good at breaking down, okay, how did I end up getting through this? What were the steps I needed to accomplish to get to the place that I am now?
Right.
So that's part of it. I would say the other part of it is that my upbringing, we didn't talk a lot about feelings. I had a good upbringing, but I also experienced some of these emotions and not being able to communicate, and sometimes silent treatment that I dealt with way before I met my husband. And so I think that I'd always taken an interest in that, in communication, and had done a lot of background work in that on my own that I was able to bring to the table.
Amazing. And tell me, the conversation, because it's very personal what you've put out into the world. It's not easy to put personal things out into the world. You can say, I know how to do this. This is not a conversation that you can say, here are the steps separated from my experience. It's really not something that you can do. Tell me a little bit about the conversation with yourself and then with your husband about getting to the point where you as individuals, you as partners, and you as a family were ready to share this with the world.
It was a difficult conversation with my husband, of course. I remember being on this walk and being like, I feel like I need to write a book about my story. I made it clear that I wanted it to be my story, not our story or his story, but my feelings and how I felt this all came to play because of the fact that I didn't have anybody to go to. And he knew that. So at first he was like, oh, yeah, that sounds great. And then, of course, it sunk in to what that really means. And it was a true testament to the work that my husband has done on his healing to get to a point where he was okay with even just putting out there that this had happened to him.
Yeah.
And it was also a true testament to the trust that we had built, that he trusted me enough to be the one, to put this out into the world. So all the work that we had done led us to this point. But I am a pharmacist, and my first instinct was just to put out all my steps. That's easy for me, right?
I mean, listen, people get there in different ways, but it does, like, this is a piece of the heart. This can't be stereo instructions. It just can't.
It couldn't. And
I
so
can't
my
imagine.
publisher was very good at pushing me to get the raw story.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And it was hard, but it was also, and as you guys can probably imagine, it was cathartic. I had pushed down how much it hurt, how much pain it was, the fear, the anxiety, the worry of what was happening to our kids. I had pushed it down, and I just kind of moved on when I felt like things had gotten better. But I needed to feel that. I needed to go back and realize how all the work that I'd done and all the perseverance and resilience techniques that I had made me get it through. And so it was really cathartic to do that. And now I feel like my message, I feel very open to letting everybody know this is my story. I've been there.
Right.
And it's a huge part of my mission is to be vulnerable.
That's so powerful. And it's funny, I'm very big on you're as sick as your secrets, right? Like it's the more shame you feel, it's like the more secretive you are and the more shame you feel about it. And generally, I always say this, like basically we all have these things, God forbid, but we all have the secrets. We all have an alcoholic in their family. We do, unfortunately, all have somewhere in there some kind of abuse. Like there's a lot of these things that are tragically, but not uncommonly, the more that I live a life, I find out that there's a lot more. And the more that I live my own life, I have my own experiences and traumas as well. And I realize, frankly, that they're traumas. Like I didn't even realize what those kinds of things were doing. And so it's kind of amazing. Like that's a big enough pill to deal with your own stuff, but to deal with somebody else's stuff as well and try to find a loving place to get to as a result is I just commend you entirely. Like it's just incredible.
Thank you. And as I wrote the book and then the book was released, I had so many people, including my sister, come to me and say, I had no idea. I just had no idea what was going on behind closed doors. And I don't take that as a compliment. I wish so badly that these people who would have been there for me, who want to be there for you, would have been able to help me more. And that is another thing that came out with my story that I wanted to make really clear, is that we don't have to do it alone. While these things are secrets, and sometimes, like in my situation, I didn't feel like it was my story to tell.
Sure. Of course.
There are ways that you can get support without violating your spouse's need for privacy.
Right.
And it requires conversations that I never had. So those are some of the things that by writing it all down, I want to be able to help others with.
Tell me a little bit about how you might start that conversation. Like if somebody was in this listening and they're in this and they're trying to do what you did and they don't even know how to start the conversation. Like how would that begin for you? What would you advise?
It's hard when you're a wife and you know how much pain your partner is in to say how much pain you are in. But the bottom line is that trauma affects everybody. There are effects of trauma all across the friends and family and network, and it's okay. And your partner knows that it's hard on you, even if they can't verbalize it. So the first step really is just to say, hey, I'm really struggling here. And I don't have the tools to get us through this by myself. But I want to get help. I want to have somebody that I can confide in, but I want you to be comfortable with that. Let's have a discussion about who that is. And usually there's one friend or family member that they're like, yeah, I would trust you discussing things further with that friend. And then there may be some friends that they're like, absolutely no, that is a no, no go. They'll tell everybody. So if you can have that discussion and really talk about it, there usually is one way. And sometimes it is somebody who's separated from it. A safe space would be a counselor or a therapist.
Right.
But it's just about starting that conversation. It's okay. It's okay for you to say that you need help and you're feeling isolated and lonely and you don't know what to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And the piece that that I certainly relate to is sort of the betraying of your spouse, like the feeling rather of the betrayal of your spouse is very powerful. And I definitely did this. And my marriage, this was not a part of my relationship, but I remember as I was just about to separate, and it was a kind of a surprise to a lot of my friends because we seemed like that perfect couple and I had spent a lot of time not telling anybody how I was feeling or that this was happening. He didn't even ask me to protect him, but just in protection of him and the way that they would see him if I said something that wasn't like it's not working, or I'm unhappy, or he's unhappy and I don't know what to do, or I feel anything. I was very scared to say anything because I didn't want to betray him. And frankly, in the end, especially when he eventually did find a new home address, the only person I ended up betraying was myself.
I did too. I said some things to some people that my husband found out later, and takes a notch out of that trust, right? And so if anybody could learn from me from that experience, that's what I would love for people to get out of this, is that it can be done, but it does require that conversation. It seems harder than it is, but if you can just come at it the way that I just said and then have a real discussion about it, that you can usually come to some sort of agreement that you're both comfortable with.
That's fantastic. That's just fantastic. So I'm sure that having children and the second piece of this is you're helping your husband to be whole. And I imagine having to make yourself whole as well with this new information and really this new piece of this person that you know so well. And then you bring family and children who don't really have the same coping mechanisms or the same comprehension. How do you do that? Like, how do you sort of make sure that they're in a safe space, but also give yourselves the space to be able to work that out?
That was a very good question. And it was something that we worked really hard on. It was a chaotic place for our kids to live for quite a while. And we were both able to have discussions with our kids, age appropriate, because of course, over 10 years, your children's capacity changes to what they can hear. But we were very honest. When they're little, the biggest thing they need to know is that it's not them. Those little brains are thinking that they've done something wrong to upset people and those kind of things. So we had lots of discussions about how we were going through a hard time. Daddy was going through a hard time, but it didn't have anything to do with them. And it was nothing that they did. So lots of reassurance when they were little and trying to keep it as separate as you could so the kids didn't see the big arguments. We did an okay job with that. Your kids sense that something's going on. So even if you think you're doing a good job, I would recommend that you say, we're having a hard time and we're doing our best and we're getting help. But if I just want you to know, it has nothing to do with you. When they got a little bit older, we did have a conversation with them about how there's bad people in the world and bad people did things to Daddy that he is healing from, and that we're trying to hold those people accountable. And that, again, it has nothing to do with them and that we're working really hard on making things better. And now my daughter is a 16-year-old, and I am teaching her the same techniques that I teach my clients on how to handle the triggers, how to separate herself from the triggers. Yes. And how to set boundaries in some cases when those things are occurring. So you can see how this whole thing has evolved and come full circle so that hopefully my kids are better able to deal. Everybody has triggers, right? Every relationship you're going to have is going to have triggers.
If you're in
Hopefully
the
they're
same
better
room with another
able.
human being.
Indeed. Hopefully they're learning something from what we learned as well.
Right. What a wonderful gift that you're giving her. And what a wonderful teenager to receive that and want it and be in the game about it. That's a pretty spectacular, very mature place to be, because that's also, it's your mom already. That's, and then it's the information and that kind of, the idea that there's trauma in the world in general, it. I guess teenagers are different at this point also, but they're far more aware than certainly we were in the Gen X universe of that.
It's been good to see. It's also been heartbreaking. I mean, because I'm like, I'm sorry that you're in this position where this has to be a discussion, but nobody asked for this to happen to
Right.
daddy and for this to be the place that he's in. And so we need to do whatever we can to help him heal. So having a lot of that empathy too, I know this is an adult discussion that I would prefer not to be having.
I see.
But this is where we're at.
The truth is, I mean, I'm sure that's, it's very hard, but also, like, as you said, if you're having any relationship with anybody, there are triggers. And I can't imagine that the tools that you're teaching her don't apply to other experiences. I mean, hopefully not this level and depth of trauma, but the tools to be able to help somebody else help themselves and also help yourself while doing it.
Absolutely. I've even had clients, and I'm hoping this is the case for her, where the tools don't just work with your spouse, they work with your coworkers. I have a client who's in HR.
Yeah, I was thinking that. That's what I kind of was like, you use it on the big stuff, but then at some point you're like, oh,
yeah,
okay.
I don't think this is about me. I don't think this emotion.
Yeah. I have definitely had those moments at work where I'm like, who hurt you? Where I want to get mad at them, but I'm like, no, this is coming from a real place that's not me, or that I put that in the wrong spot or something like that. It's like, yeah, you've got some stuff. You shouldn't be taking it out on me, but you've got some stuff also that
right. So hopefully that's the thought.
Yeah, exactly. No, but also the piece about empathy is a big one. It's like empathy. I see it with my kid. She's unusually empathetic she's 6. She's a baby, but my parents are in our lives. And my father's 88 and has some health issues, and my mom is blind. That's hard for her. It kind of breaks my heart sometimes, because I'm like, I had a baby late. She didn't have like them young, and they're awesome even now, like at all the ages, but like they're for them too. But she has, as a result, gained this empathetic eye that most 6-year-olds have no idea it's going on. She was on a seesaw a couple of 2 weeks ago, and she saw a little girl crying by the seesaw and got off her seesaw to go check on the kid. Empathy is such an underrated quality in a human being, because you don't get paid for it and you don't have accolades for it. But a lot of what you're doing is about empathy. It seems like
it really is.
Yeah.
I love the quote. I think I heard it from Mel Robbins when she was talking about boundaries, speaking of, but she said, there aren't toxic people. There are toxic behaviors.
Right.
And in the case of a trauma survivor, and what I referred to about those coping mechanisms can seem so toxic, it is a behavior. It's not them. And I think a lot of times we as a society, there's a lot of, they're a narcissist. It can't be helped. Right. Where I think that if we were more empathetic to the fact that often these things are behaviors and not the underlying person, I think that maybe we could make better relationships.
That's amazing. That's amazing. The opposite side of this, my question is, so I date. There's a lot of women who are divorced or what have you, or having new relationships, obviously, like just starting to have relationships. I imagine that there is I hope this is okay to say this, but I imagine that there is also the moment where you're like, I can't do anything about this, and this is they have to do this, and I need to leave. Like, does that come up as well? Because what you're doing is really like, it's incredible that you're empowering women to be able to show up to their husbands or their spouse. But I'm sure sometimes it's like, that's not going to work. Or do you get that? I guess is my question. Do you get it where sometimes when you're working with somebody that you're like, I mean, maybe you're not saying that directly to them, but you're like, this is them needing to do work for themselves, and you probably can't do that. Is that something that you come across, or?
Yes, absolutely. There is a whole section in my program called Should I Stay or Should I Go? And one of the things, of course, is if you're scared, if you're feeling threatened, those are things where that is, not okay. And those are some situations. But what I do is I take the wives through a process of, we've made this much progress. Is it enough? Is it enough? And if you're still like that, we did make some progress. We're able to have conversations without it escalating, but I still feel very alone. I don't know if we're ever going to connect. I don't know if that intimacy is ever going to be there. Then we talk about, what would it take for you to get there? What would it need to change in order for you to get there? And then what, the decision would be made, if you can't. So I don't want anyone to settle in a relationship that they're not happy in. We should be on a journey with someone. We shouldn't make them be our journey.
That's
So
powerful.
really having that, yeah, Jay Shetty, love that.
Oh, wow. That's very powerful. Yeah.
And that's my stance on that, is that while progress can be made, in some cases it isn't enough. And what are those for you?
That's really spectacular, because I think that it feels out here very binary. You're either like, I'm going to help, or I can't do this. But it really doesn't have to be. Is that what I'm hearing?
It doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
You want to get to a place where there's a more equal partnership. It feels very unequal when you're the support. It feels very unequal. And that isn't the goal. The goal is to be on equal footing, to be able to support each other. You
Wow.
also want to get support from your partner. That's where you want to get to.
Okay. Okay. What if you are a trauma survivor and maybe you've done work or haven't, and you see that your spouse are showing signs of something that you recognize? Does that come up? How would one handle that? How would one even approach it?
It is complicated, especially if the trauma responses are opposite. So one withdraws and one fight, gets into the fight mode. And so, but the tools that I give for responding to triggers, it's the same. It really is no good conversation. Nothing good can come of trying to push a conversation when somebody's been triggered, or if you've both been triggered. So it's just about diffusing that situation, taking time. And I don't know whoever came up with the expression of don't go to bed mad, but they clearly were not married to someone who had trauma responses, because that is not the case. No. I often recommend days, if it takes days, to come back to that conversation. And it seems very counterintuitive, but I promise you, if you can start the conversation in a place where neither of you is triggered and you're both in a calm and better place, then the follow-up is much better. So the key isn't letting it go. It's about having that follow-up, but waiting for the right time.
That's really a great piece of advice in general, I think, because just because you're ready to talk about it doesn't mean they're ready to receive it or even go there.
Most of the time I hear people say, it's bugging me. I want to talk about it. I'm like, well, do you want to talk about it so it goes well? Or do you want to talk about it when it's too soon and not have it go well?
Right, right. And that's also when your supports need to come in. Like if you need to talk about it, then you need to go to the supports that are going to support you to talk about it rather than going to the person who's doing it. That's never going to work. It just doesn't ever really work that way.
You got it. That's
Yeah.
exactly it. I have that support built in. That person who you've
That's right.
agreed with can be your support during those times. So you're not just sitting there just wallowing in it.
Yeah.
No, you're getting the support that you need, but you're going to have that really good conversation about what's going on and how you can make it better when it's the right time.
What is trauma?
That's a very good question. Some of my clients, their husband has never really revealed a trauma history. It's suspected, right? And so I would say if you default to those coping mechanisms that I talked about,
Mm-hmm.
and that you seem to be triggered by certain things,
Mm-hmm.
I would say that's when these tools can really come into play, despite what the trauma is. And I would say that in general, I know some of my husband's history, but there's a lot that I've had to let go that I'm not ever going to know. Why is the fall a terrible time of year for him? I don't know. I don't know why that is, but it just is. And so, knowing that this is always a bad time of year for him, we can do the things that we know keep us healthy and keep us in a healthier environment.
Mm-hmm.
So, I would say I don't get so much into what the trauma was, just if you're having those behaviors, why they could be happening,
Right.
knowing that there might be a trauma history there.
Right. I guess I asked because I have this conversation more so lately, but there's sort of a low hum of trauma sometimes. It's not dramatic, air quote dramatic. It's not, and thank God, let me just say that, like fortunately, and some traumas are really just the venomous of human beings, just the worst of human beings that have been affected children in this way or something like that. But I guess what I'm saying is that others I find sometimes there are people who have had trauma, but it's like a low hum where someone has had a great deal of trauma. It's very much present, but it's not big in terms of there's a piece around when you experience trauma that is, well, somebody else had it worse, so that's not technically trauma. And it still presents itself in the same way. It's you're withdrawn or disassociated, or you have these very specific triggers, or you can't deal with the fall. There's a lot of these things that are often disregarded because, well, it wasn't that bad, so I'm just going to leave it alone. That still very much live in your body and in your behavior. Is that something that you find in this? You may not, I don't know, but I like in terms of when you're working with the spouses, is that something that ever comes up? I'm just curious.
Yes. And I would say that I do have some wives who are like, it wasn't some big thing. It was just that they had an alcoholic father.
Right.
He didn't hit me or hit him or any, things that we consider big, but that they felt abandoned.
Right.
And so they have these coping mechanisms that are seriously affecting their relationship. Absolutely. I don't think there's any big or small trauma. I just really don't. I think that we all have some issues in our past that we have trouble getting over.
Right.
And the more that it's affecting the relationship, the more I feel like we do, especially as women and wives, we try to say, why can't I figure this out?
Right.
I have my whole life, everything else in my life figured out, but why can I not figure out this one small thing? Why is this one stupid fight happening over and over and over again, and I can't figure it out? Don't worry about it. Let's just try some new tools and create some new patterns and just do it. Just do it. Don't worry about you or whether or not the trauma was big enough to constitute needing help.
Right.
That's not the issue. Yeah. The issue is just let's try and make a life that we all deserve.
Right, right, right. That's fantastic. I feel like that's such a big piece of it. And your next book will probably be how to just have a healthy relationship with your partner, because it sounds
Yes.
like a lot of these in a different scale are very fundamentally necessary to have a healthy, loving, supportive, and be supported relationship.
I agree. I
Amazing.
agree.
Amazing. You're spectacular. I just think it's incredible what you're doing.
Thank you. I'm so happy. I'm so thankful for you for allowing me to come on and tell my story so that nobody else has to suffer through it alone like I did.
Yeah. Yeah. We do not have to suffer alone. We do not have to suffer in silence. We can be around people and also have support while we work through our stuff.
Yes,
For sure.
100%.
For sure. So tell us where we can find you. Also, where we can find the book. That's a big one.
Yeah. So my website is the best place. It's where I have all my repository of resources to help people. So, and it's easy, www.daniellesebastian.com. I offer everyone, if this resonates with you and you are wondering if this could be that piece of the puzzle that you can't put your finger on in your relationship, that I offer everybody a free call, a free coaching call where I talk about what you're experiencing and whether or not this could be what's going on. And I give you real life tools to help you deal with some of those patterns. So I offer that. It's right on my website. You can book a call. I also have other free resources there. I have a page for my book, but you can also get it on Amazon. If you put my name in there, then my book comes up, same thing. And you can purchase that and hear my story in deep detail.
We love that. Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you. And social media, do you do social media?
Instagram and Facebook, Danielle Sebastian _wife care.
Oh, I love it. Okay. Well, thank you so
you.
much. This has really been very eye-opening and it's such an important, untouched area. So thank you for coming on and talking to me. It's been great.
What a wonderful conversation. I loved it.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, please hit subscribe. You can also find me at carolpodell.com, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Carol Podell. You can watch this at She Takes the Lead podcast on YouTube. If you'd like to keep in touch, go to my website. I've got a few things I'd love to send you. In the meantime, mwah.